So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Janelle James, Senior Vice President with Ipsos UU. Janelle, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you everyone that decided to join us today. We are thrilled to host this session, which is a dynamic twist on our typical roundtable series in honor of Black Business Month. As you know, this session is for women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses and those who are interested in better supporting them. We have a short presentation, and then we'll continue with our dynamic panel. The presentation should only be about 10 to 15 minutes so that we have ample time for our panel conversation in the Q&A. Thank you in advance for submitting questions via the survey that we shared, and we also have some additional questions for the panel to help drive the discussion. As a reminder, here are our panelists that are joining us today. We have Irene Walker from Meta. Unfortunately, we're having some technical challenges, and even though you can't see her on camera, she is with us, and so she'll definitely be part of the conversation. Sherelle Sampson from Canby, Dee Miller from Visa, Elisa Byrne also from Ipsos, and Kendra Speed from LinkedIn. So we promised that this session would be interactive, so let's get started with a few poll questions. So I will share the poll, you'll see the questions on the slide, and then the screen will transition to where you actually need to vote. We'll share the responses with everyone, and then we'll move on to the next question. So here we go, first question. Tell me about the business that you own, lead, or work for, and whether it is minority or business certified. We can switch to the poll, Ellen.
All right, Janelle, I've shared the quick results. Do you see them?
Okay. I can't see them yet, but maybe I'm not doing something right. So that's okay. I'll go back to sharing my screen. No, I'm already sharing my screen.
We may have to get you to share screen again, but I quickly let everyone know that we got a 50% for yes, a 30% for no, and a 20% for neither. So I'm going to hide the results and see if we can get your presentation in presentation mode again.
Okay.
And then just the presentation mode. Oh, no.
There we go.
There we are. Excellent.
Okay. Hopefully we're on a roll. Second question. My biggest business challenge today is related to talent, capital, marketing, growth, or scaling operations, or other.
Oh, there's a lot more activity with this one already. I can see it. Okay, it's slowed down, so I think almost everyone has probably voted. And therefore, I'm going to try and share it. Here we go. I think we should, do you see them, Janelle?
I don't, but if you can talk us through it again, that would be great.
Sure. Talent is 10%, capital is 19%, marketing 43%, by far the biggest, growth and scaling at 24%, and we've got other at 5%.
Wonderful. Okay. And can you see my presentation now? No?
Yeah, but you need to get back into presentation mode. I guess the poll pops you out, Janelle. Something we didn't realize until just now.
Okay, wonderful. So poll 3, we conduct market research weekly, monthly, quarterly, annually, or rarely, never.
All right, the poll is open. And, oh, wow. You'll be interested to see the results in this one.
I am.
Okay, the poll seems to have died off, so I'm going to close it and share it. All right, so starting from the top, weekly 11%, monthly 5%, quarterly is also 11%, annually 26%. However, rarely and never is 47%.
Okay, wonderful. And just want to make sure you can see my screen.
Yep.
Number 4, the audience I would most like to learn about to fuel business, and that's market research can be beyond customers, so that's one of the reasons that we're asking this question. Customers, advertisers, distributors, or retailers, investors, competitors, or some form of media.
Okay, here we go. And it is starting. All right, okay. I'm starting to not see any changes in the answer, so I'll go ahead and close that and share the results. Okay, way by far is customers and consumers at 84%. Advertisers, we have 11%. We have 0 for investors and competitors, but we do have a 5% for media.
Okay. And last but not least, you just won $50K to spend on one of the 5 things below. Which one would you choose? Spot bonuses for the team, supplies or business development, social media or some sort of advertising, market research, or recruiting/hiring?
Okay, here we go. Okay, I haven't actually seen too many. Oh, wait. Yeah. Doesn't look like there's too many changes, so I feel like everyone's pretty much voted. All right, I'm going to close it and share the results. Okay, well, I'll start off with the top one at 40% with supplies and business development. Second came in social media and advertising with 25%. Next came recruiting and then hiring at 15%. And the bonus and market research came in both at 10%.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you, Ellen. I'm gonna go back to sharing. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes, it's perfect.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for your survey responses. That's really just to give us a little bit more fodder for the conversation that we have later. But, really excited to chat with you today. One of the things I absolutely love to do when there's a topic I'm curious about is just to see what's being talked about in the news, right? And so I have a bunch of news clippings here on the topic that we're discussing today. And so what's really fascinating is while many disparities still exist, today minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses and other underrepresented businesses have greater opportunities for recognition, resources, revenue, and even restitution. I'm sure many of you heard about the beachfront property, Bruce's Beach in California, that was recently returned to that family. But it's interesting just to see how many different aspects of it, from businesses getting attention to, opportunities, supplier diversity, all types of things. The economy is challenging for everyone, but small businesses, minority-owned businesses, women-owned businesses, they definitely tend to be the hardest hit. And so it's important to understand what resources exist. And so while there are lots of different things that can be done to maximize or take advantage of these opportunities. One way to continue to maximize opportunities and close the gaps or disparities that exist is through market research. So we're really excited to talk to you today about this. Now, market research is not just about consumers or customers. It definitely is a significant part of it, but it's any information, any data that helps businesses achieve greater understanding of people, markets, and society. And how we define people really depends on the businesses that we have and the businesses that we interact with. Anything from viewers, fans, gamers, investors, citizens, advertisers. And it's really about amplifying the full spectrum of voices in the rooms where decisions are made. And oftentimes success comes from having an underlying knowledge of diverse communities and individuals behind the data. And so that's a lot of what we're going to be talking about today. Strength in market research and data really lies in diverse and intersectional perspectives that bring this greater understanding. So what kind of research questions can we answer? Or what kind of questions can we typically answer with research? It's very varied. But I like to think about it in a few different categories. We have brand strategy. Typical question is, how do I maximize growth and all of the different opportunities and ways to do that? User experience or customer experience, a key question that we often ask is, how do I create and deliver distinctive experiences, right? These are things that we often ask and answer on behalf of clients. Another area, media, communications, and content. How do I engage customers and key stakeholders? And then innovation, how do I develop new and differentiated products, services, and experiences? But it's not just these, and I don't want anyone to think that this is exhaustive in any way, but research can also be used to determine these questions, which I think oftentimes people don't naturally think about. So in terms of brand strategy, what role can DEI or supplier diversity play in growing or scaling our business? User experience, what user journeys or paths to purchase should customers, donors, or investors follow, right? And really keeping in mind that customers aren't the only stakeholder you might need to be concerned with in terms of driving your business. In terms of media, communications, and content, we can also ask, how do I attract the best talent or investors? The content that we create, the communications that we create, the media that we decide to use, lines are often blurred between customers and talent and even investors. And then from an innovation perspective, how can I partner to develop new and differentiated products, services, and experiences? So lots of different questions. These aren't exhaustive, but these are many of the ones that we answer for our clients and we're seeing in the marketplace. So the thing that I'm really excited about to share with you today is everything that you guys shared with us before this session. So as you know, there was two ways to register, two parts to the registration for this, where we issued a survey as part of it, to learn a little bit more about the businesses that would be joining us today. And you guys shared some really interesting things with us. A few things to note: not everyone that registered completed the survey, and not everyone that completed the survey registered, but everyone that we'll be focusing on in terms of the results is a minority or women-owned business. And so it really brings some interesting perspective to life. So here's a perspective that we collected for the session. So we had 58 survey completes totally, and 56 of those were minority or women-owned businesses. So we really have a great sample to look at. Even with 56, we like to consider this qualitative. So it's really great to give us an understanding and directionally get a sense for what's happening, but we wouldn't consider this quantitative research, even though it's a survey. Less than half of the minority-owned and women-owned businesses were actually certified as minority-owned and women-owned businesses. So we know there's probably a host of reasons why that is, but it's a really interesting thing to think about in the context of this conversation and being found as a business. 14 categories were represented, so lots of variety in terms of the businesses that we were able to connect with, but most of them are either technology business or professional services, so that's important to remember. And over 50 of the people that we were able to talk to or connect with were actually owners, founders, and or CEOs of these businesses. So very few of the people were employees or leaders of the business. They're actually founders or owners. So the first slide that I just wanted to give you some perspective on is just the categories that were represented. So you can really get a sense here of the variety and how the bulk of it really was in professional services and technology. And on the side, there are a few verbatims just so you can get a sense for how everyone described what their company does. So obviously just a little bit of perspective here from the over 50 responses that we had, but you can see that we have everything from outsourced COOs for historically underrepresented startups to public insurance adjusting firms to racial literacy and diversity training to sustainable clothing brands that supports parents and children every day of the week with positive messaging and affirmations. So the next key question that we asked is, what would you say your biggest challenge is today? And it was really amazing to sort of look at the verbatims for this one because there was a lot of variety. But what was interesting when I was literally coding or categorizing all the responses is they fell in only a handful of areas, and you can see those areas here. The majority of the challenges were actually marketing challenges, so related to product, people, place, positioning, anything like that. And then you can see the variety as well. Quite a few people noted capital as a challenge, and capital was often coded as anything related to cash flow, finding investors, funding, anything like that, and then scaling and growth, which is very normal for small businesses as you figure out how to get to your next stage of the business. But you can see some of the verbatims there. The biggest challenge is competing in a crowded coaching marketplace and finding the appropriate business tools to stand out. Or our biggest challenge is growing our client base. We've had initial success in the education and nonprofit sector through connections in our personal and professional networks. Or early days, but one of the challenges is around branding. So you can really see the variety there and see how that variety is still contributing to a lot of challenges related to marketing. This, I think, is one of my favorites. So we asked the question, if you could learn one thing about your customers or consumers that you don't already know, what it would be. And so again, all open-ended responses, but taking a look at all those responses, I coded them into, honestly, very few things. And so really interesting to see that habits and needs are what really people are curious about. And you can see through the verbatims how that is really panning out. So we're looking to understand how purchasing decisions are made for DEI. We're interested in understanding receptivity around my offerings. When they allocate budgets for my services, how much are those budgets? Early days, but one of the challenges is around branding, messaging that resonates in different regions and political environments. So one of the really fascinating things in all of the responses, people were really curious about what, right? What processes they follow, what routines they have, what behaviors they exhibit, or even how they do a certain thing, how they achieve success, how they might incorporate my business. Not one of the responses actually were curious about why. And that's one of the really fascinating things that market research can offer, because what keeps you at the surface level, right? When we talk in market research or marketing in general, it's often about understanding the whys, and there can be so many different levels of whys. And that's often one of the really amazing things that help you create a differentiated product. So not only knowing what they need help with, but why they need that help or why they have those certain behaviors. So that's a really critical thing that's important to keep in mind. So who's thriving? I want to share or highlight a few examples that we found very interesting in terms of businesses that we connected with. And specifically, I didn't say who's doing well, right? Because I don't want to say who's doing well versus who's doing poorly, because one of the important things to remember is that every business is on their own journey. And what you do from a market research perspective is not necessarily about what's best and what's worst. It's what's best for your business. It's very specific. And so these businesses are really interesting and thriving because they seem to have found some really interesting approaches that are really fit for their business. So I'll go through these quickly. So the first is Sherelle Sampson with Canby. She's actually one of our panelists, so we'll get the opportunity to hear a little bit more from her. And so you'll see a little bit more about her business here. I won't go into too much detail, but one of the things I found really interesting is we created this profile, and you can see that her business, her brand has gotten quite a bit of success and awards and honors, is what she noted around what constitutes market research. And so she says, as an entrepreneur, whether you're talking to investors or retailers, you're expected to know your business and your consumer better than anyone else. We use a combination of quantitative and qualitative data. And she talks about Facebook, Instagram, and Amazon Insights, Instagram surveys, Google Analytics, and how they're invaluable tools. And what I particularly appreciated about this is not only the combination of qualitative and quantitative, but how she's using so many of the resources available to her to find these insights. What's really fascinating today, and something we'll touch on briefly later, is we're surrounded by data today. Absolutely surrounded in terms of, social media, in terms of product usage, any number of things. And it's in that combination you can find some really helpful perspective. So here's our next business we're going to profile. This is Adam Wisniewski from EX3 Labs. It's a technology company that's been around since 2016. And one of the really fascinating things that they've done over the years at this company is create really amazing engagement tools to connect with their primary audiences. And the quote that I actually pulled here, they are part of this accelerator in Chicago called 1871, and they created a shared space for other businesses or other startups at 1871, for customers to really use as an ideation lab. And they put a lot of technology in there, and they just basically let people play and work in that space. But it was also an opportunity to not only engage their customers, to learn a lot about them and do research. Today, it's interesting how that sort of morphed. Because, as the pandemic and people aren't as in person as much anymore, they actually do a lot of thought leadership and lunch and learns on a regular basis by category to engage their regular customers. So something really interesting there. And so here in this quote, he talks about how market research has really helped him support particular industries that his business focuses on. And last but not least, wanted to highlight Dawn Carr from Mahogany Insights. So her business was founded in 2021. It's actually a market research firm that's a minority owned business that is certified. And one of the fascinating things she talks about having been a marketer and market research is just the role that market research plays just naturally in her business. So she shares a lot of great perspective here, and then specifically talks about, I'll read that verbatim. Since I'm in the business of market research, everything I do falls here. And she's constantly listening to clients, running everything through the lens of how to help. Every offer to help is like a test and learn. And if they spark to help, perhaps there's a potential offer. And she talks about having regular 30-minute casual conversations with her clients to really get more perspective and understand how to move from there. So the last thing I want to go through pretty quickly, just given our timing, is so a few market research trends that we're seeing overall. And so not just related to small businesses or minority or women-owned businesses, but what we're seeing across the market research landscape. And so I'm going to do a few things with each one of these. Share a little perspective on them, but also speak to why it's important to understand for your organization. So the first one, leveraging technology and AI. So this is really interesting on two levels. One, a lot of companies are leveraging technology and AI, not only in their market research, but also in the products and services that they offer. So this is really fascinating. It's something that we're seeing in a lot of different ways. It's a big trend overall, and something that not only you should keep in mind for your businesses, but it's important to think about because, algorithmic bias, when we talk about artificial intelligence, algorithmic bias is something that usually comes up there. And this is an important thing to understand. It's real because a lot of technology is not centered on everyone. It's centered on a specific person or a specific community. And so it doesn't necessarily work in the ideal way for everyone else. And so the important thing to remember about that is there are lots of ways to interrupt potential bias just by including human perspective at a lot of junctures. And so that's something that we like to think about always pairing with technology and with AI, is making sure you have human perspective at various points. Another thing that keeps coming up when we talk about technology and AI is a lot of brands are curious about the metaverse and what their presence or what their category's presence will look like in the metaverse. So that's something to keep in mind. Second, conducting research with experts. This is a really interesting trend that we're seeing in a few different ways. One, because B2B, business-to-business enterprises are also doing more market research in addition to business-to-consumer enterprises. But it's interesting because even for business-to-consumer work, they're doing research with experts to find out any number of things to drive their business. Particularly what's fascinating is by talking to experts as well as consumers and customers, you can often go further and faster. So for instance, if you have a product that is connected to children in some way, or for children in some way, it might be helpful to talk to preschool teachers or social workers or pediatricians who might come in contact with a lot of children and offer a lot of perspective at once. So that's a really interesting trend that we're seeing. Third, including greater accessibility. Leveraging technology and AI, this is a really interesting one because it's twofold, meaning that you can be more accessible in the research that you conduct, and you can be more accessible in the products and services that you offer. So this is a really interesting one as well. Accessibility is not just for people with disabilities, it's being accessible to often underrepresented and marginalized people in all groups. And so that's a really interesting trend that we're seeing. Advancing DEI and sustainability. Obviously, DEI in particular has become more popular to talk about since the murder of George Floyd, and an increasing interest in social justice and racial justice. We're seeing this in a few different ways, not only in terms of what companies want to offer in the marketplace, but also what they're doing in the workplace, and they're doing research on both fronts. Really important for minority-owned businesses and women-owned businesses to think about, not only in terms of products and services they might offer, but also in terms of how you might be partnering with larger organizations or how they might play into your own supply chain. So supplier diversity, for instance, is a really important part of this. The fifth trend that we're seeing is illuminating underrepresented audiences. And because so many products and services are centered on a mainstream experience, a lot of brands are trying to illuminate the experiences of those on the margin so they can make sure they're including just a full range of experiences as they create products and services. So this is a really interesting one. Really important to underscore that it's not just about race, gender, and sexuality, but also about socioeconomics. So you have people at the top of the pyramid, people at the bottom of the pyramid, and they might have different experiences or different ages or life stages. Really important. So for instance, conducting research on Gen Z specifically, or Gen Alpha, or boomers, et cetera. And then with illuminating underrepresented and marginalized audiences, we often talk about intersectionality, and that's a great way to think about identity and customers and products and everything. Number 6, tracking evolving media consumption. So as media options expand, it's critical to understand what people are doing so that you know how to reach them, how to connect with them. And so there's always research on this. And then last but not least, becoming more consumer centric. And so one of the questions that we're often seeing in our work is clients and brands not just wanting to understand what a particular consumer or customer is doing in their category, because the reality is they probably have a lot of data from their own category anyway, but they want to understand them as a whole person, understand the other types of things that they're doing and seeing to see how they can make better and stronger connections with them. So those are the trends that we're seeing from a market research perspective. I hope it's really helpful. If you have questions, definitely add them to the chat and we'll make sure that we get to them. And right now we're going to transition to our discussion. So I hope all of that background was great fodder for us to connect with our panel participants. And so the questions we're going to start with are questions that were shared in advance. If you have questions, please put them into the chat. And then if for some reason we don't get to your questions, we will always follow up with by email with responses. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I am going to transition to, can everyone, is my screen gone? Wonderful. I'm always nervous with this. So thank you so much, Irene, Elisa, Kendra, Sherelle, and Dee. So excited to have this conversation with you. What I would love to do to start is have each of you introduce yourselves briefly. Just by, saying your role again, how long you've worked in this particular role, and then tell me about a recent project that highlights, what you do in this space. Yeah, so I'll start with Irene, because we can't see her.
Yes, you can see me. I'm like the talking head. Thank you, Janelle, and good afternoon or good morning to all of you who are here. As she mentioned, my name is Irene Walker. I work for Meta, and I lead a program that's called Elevate, and this is part of our business equity program within Meta. And for those of you who are wondering, you're like, what is Meta? It was Facebook before, and then our name changed to Meta. And so in this program, I created it because of living in Oakland at the time, originally from LA. So I certainly know about Bruce's Beach, Janelle, and understand about equity. And my father as well was a small business owner and trying to get his business off the ground. And many of the same issues that Janelle pointed out in terms of capital and what have you were the same things that he was trying to get. And it was difficult for him. And so I created a program to help Black and Latinx small businesses with understanding how to grow your brand online, because we could see internally how, as employees of color, we could see how other businesses were growing exponentially. And we want to make sure that businesses of color have that same understanding and education as well. So the program is called Meta Elevate. You can find it on facebook.fb.com. And we provide free training and access to learning, as well as one-on-one mentoring and coaching for small businesses to understand what they need to do for growing their business online.
Wonderful. Thank you. Dee, do you want to go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Dee Miller. I'm Director of Inclusive Design and Product Equity, working with our Inclusive Client Partnership team at Visa. One of the most recent projects there, and what we focus on, is how do we remove bias and embed inclusivity within our products and services. And one of the recent projects in which I had the opportunity to serve as a inclusive product expert, collaborating with our North America innovation team, was we applied the inclusive design approach to help one of our inclusive clients who's focusing on servicing the financial needs of Black America, with obtaining in-depth insights on the needs and types of funding that they need, the barriers that they're up against as small Black business owners. And so we were able to bring a unique perspective and identify opportunities for how this particular inclusive client could really help better support Black small business owners in the banking space.
Wonderful. Kendra, do you want to go next?
Have to go. So hello, my name is Kendra Speed, and I am Director of Consumer Market Research at LinkedIn. Hopefully my shirt's showing. So, and I'm in week 6 at LinkedIn. Similar to what Irene spoke about, I have great passion for the subject, growing up in a home of entrepreneurs who had a company for almost 30 years. So a lot of passion for the topic. As I think about a recent project, and I think I'm stretching the term recent over the last 5 years, that I'm proud of having worked on in really making a difference in hearing the voices of diverse communities, would be a project that I worked on with Procter & Gamble as well as BET, and I was kind of sitting in the middle as managing this project, which was all about understanding Black men and humanizing the experience of Black men. I mentioned this project because there are some elements of the project that really speak to what small business owners could do to get closer to their consumers. So what we did was we went to a couple markets, Atlanta, Detroit. In Atlanta, we assembled Black men in a barbershop context and spoke with them about their daily lives within their context. We also spent time in their homes. I mention that because, yes, we did it on a bigger budget, but that's something that could be replicated by any business in saying, how do I bring my consumers together to learn more about them and get in context and learn what their challenges are, as well as what some of their biggest dreams and hopes are.
Love it. Thank you. Sherelle, do you want to go next?
Sure. So good morning, good afternoon. I am Sherelle Sampson, founder and CEO of Canvy. I am the small business owner here on the panel, and just really happy to be with you today to talk about how you can really infuse insights and research into your business to help you achieve your business goals. And so latest project that I've dealt with in terms of working with a diverse entrepreneur. I'm a diverse entrepreneur, so I work in the business every day, but I had the pleasure to actually go to a STEM summer camp and talk to girls and our next generation of beauty leaders. They're thinking about chemistry, they're thinking about getting in the beauty industry and really talking about STEM careers. And so that was a true honor and a project that I love to work on and really give some insights towards. So that's the latest for me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Last but not least, Elisa.
Hi, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Janelle. Thank you for having me. I'm Elisa Burned. I'm a Vice President of Research at Ipsos. I've been in market research for about 20 years, 13 of which at Ipsos. A lot of my experience has centered around what we call social impact advisory. So basically helping clients measure social impact in the communities they serve or operate. One of the most recent works involved measuring social impact of a number of initiatives on the livelihoods of smallholder farmers in Ghana and Cote d'Ivoire, including teaching them about farming as a business. So very fascinating stuff, if you ask me.
Love it. So what I want to do next is kind of a little bit of a creative exercise. I want you guys to come up with a nickname for yourself, but not any old nickname, a nickname that tells me what your priorities are or what's most important to you when you are connecting with or serving a minority-owned or women-owned business. Kendra, do you want to go first?
Sure. So the nickname that I came up with is Wave Runner. When I mention Wave Runner, it really starts at standing at the shore of the ocean, understanding the courage and the boldness that is required to leave that shoreline and go out into water. So that is something that I espouse, throughout my life, and also something that I think applies directly to being in small business. Having the courage to step out there, going into what could be rough waters, and riding that wave, thinking about when are we conserving energy? When are we going hard and being bold and going against the current to be able to make forward movement? So for me, it's all about being a wave runner, being bold, being courageous, and being tenacious.
Love it. Irene, do you want to go next? What's your nickname?
Yeah, so mine would be the Hidden Figures Highlighter. So we've all seen the movie Hidden Figures, and we also know that throughout history, many inventions and creations of people of color have been suppressed, but we know that they are figures that we no longer want to have hidden. And so what I suggest is that we highlight each other and that we bring to light so that there are no more hidden figures. As I mentioned about even my father, he was a hidden figure creating an invention that was supposed to help Black women, and that is a hero to us as a community. And so we want to make sure that there are no more hidden figures and that we highlight all of them.
Love it. Hidden Figures Highlighter. Sherelle, do you want to go next?
Yes. So my nickname would be Miss Make It Happen. And I just think about every day going through the challenges of business, thinking about how you need to be intentional, having that resilience as a business owner. And so we often have to tell ourselves, let's just make it happen. I don't have the money, I don't have the funds, I don't have the entire plan, but I got to make it happen. So I think that would be my nickname.
Wonderful. Elisa, do you want to go next?
Yes. So my nickname derives from my research background, but also my academic training as a sociologist. And I'll go with shoemaker because we've been trained and we're always taught to put ourselves in others' shoes. And this really has accompanied me throughout my career. So every day we're trying to do that. So I thought that was a good nickname for me.
Love it. Last but not least, Dee.
All right, so I related it back to Visa, and so my nickname is Miss Show Me the Money. It's about, looking at Visa's purpose. I really live and execute, and the reason this role was created to really uplift everyone everywhere by being the best way to pay and be paid. So I'm all about building products and services to support open and inclusive economy and make money move.
Wonderful. Now, I want to dip into the Q&A that we received in advance. So one of the questions we received was, if a startup or any business could do one piece of research, what should that be? Anyone want to tackle that?
Sure, I'll start. So just a little bit about me too. I have 15 plus years corporate marketing experience, and Canvy has been around for about 7 years. So I have the beauty of pulling from both of those experiences. And so with that, I would say really think outside the box and research nonlinear ways how you really acquire customers, right? I saw that was like the #1 focus. And the reason I say that is because you have, granted, I did see that a majority of you are professional services, but what are some of those smart assistants that you could possibly use to tap into that audience? What are some of those predictive shopping apps that you can use, or if you are a CPG company? What are some of those predictive live streaming technologies or platforms that you can plug into, right? Oftentimes we think about e-com and we think about big box retail, but I often challenge you to think about those, because those are the ways that really no one's tackling into, but it's opportunity as you think about going forward.
Love it. Any other thoughts?
One thing I would say is, and this leans back on, I'm the kind of person that likes frameworks and tools that can help me do my work. So what I would recommend is finding a really good framework, whether it's something like the 5 C's, whether it's saying assess the landscape, then look at my who, then my what do I need to say to them? How do I go to market? Find that framework, start filling it in, and then looking across it and saying, like, where are the gaps? For me personally, I think it's important to understand just the market landscape and understanding how your business orients in that landscape. Who are the customers? What do they need? And what are the most efficient ways to go about really speaking to them? So find a framework, fill it in, work that framework, and then think about where that biggest gap is. Go there.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that as well. I think really understanding your competition, direct and indirect, is critical for understanding where you fit. And I think sometimes we all get this great idea and we miss it. And I see it in larger corporations too. Like, products are built and they're like, why is it not selling? And we really didn't understand that was there a big enough demand? And were we really getting to the right need? Were we really solving the right problem? And so it's critical, I think, to really talk to your industry experts, talk to your experts. Like earlier we said, that's a trend because it's needed. Read those trend reports. There's so many different free insights reports. Talk to your friends, have small little focus groups, look at this secondary data, and if you can, back to what Sherelle does, like I think she said she's been using Facebook surveying online. It's great, it's free, and it's available. So circling back and doing that.
Yeah. Next question from the Q&A. What tools does your business offer that you feel might be underutilized and helpful for minority or women-owned businesses needing to do research or anything else? Underutilized. Well, actually, let me start with this one. I will say, so I work for a market research firm called Ipsos, and I'll be honest in saying that I've been surprised at how intellectually generous the firm is. I mean, we give away so much information all the time. I mean, I'm even surprised just following the company on LinkedIn how much you can learn. And I know a lot of other research firms are like that as well. To Dee's point, there's so much that you can find online for free. The other thing, I don't obviously work for this company, but I sense it's sort of underutilized, and I've been using it for so many years, is Google Alerts. I set up Google Alerts for everything, on people, on topics that I'm interested in. I mean, it is the easiest way to stalk a person or a topic, because if it pops up online, it'll come right in your email inbox. And so if there's something that you're interested in doing or learning about, you'll literally have your own personalized feed through Google Alerts. So yeah, anyone else? Underutilized tools?
Well, of course, kind of, you gave me a little bit of a hook in saying LinkedIn. So LinkedIn is a great place to go to. One, just putting the question out there. I think it is important to say, like, there are, I'll say those of us out there who, whether we work in the industry every day, we want to lean in and help and share our knowledge and share some of that expertise. So it's that courage of saying, so when the question's asked, what are your biggest challenges? Being ready with what those things are and being open to putting it out there, because that's the only way people can, create this community of support, this community of learning and helping you along the way. So I would say leverage networks such as LinkedIn and making those connections, but then and also being a part of the conversation and growing that conversation.
Yeah, I think for Visa has like a Visa Small Business Hub. And I think the two sets I would recommend is there's Practical Business Skills, which is like a guide, a digital learning guide through all the steps from understanding to go to market. But then also we also have a business and economic insight. So our Visa economists have come together and they send that out. So you just sign up for email. You can update as much as you want and need on a regular basis. So those would be things that I would think are helpful for research.
I would also contend, I completely agree with both Dee and with Kendra. Those are resources we drive small business to constantly. And one of the feedback questions from the survey that Janelle said was that many small businesses are looking at marketing and what do they have to do to grow your business. So a little bit into the previous question is, have you thought about what your why is? What's the reason to buy that you want to help then pull together to make into a marketing strategy? Now, Facebook offers many ways for you to learn about how to do all of this. And with Elevate, you get all of that training for free. It's curated for businesses of color. And one of the tools that we recommend people use if you're not already using, and I'm sure many of you already are, but it's a tool called Canva. And Canva is an option for you to use to grow and highlight your business and your story online through any of the channels. And we leverage LinkedIn to do that. We partner with companies like Visa to create hubs and accelerators to support. And then the last thing I would say is the minority business certification or women-based enterprise certifications. Those help to unlock doors too. So I would say find in your local area where you can get into getting certified.
Thank you so much, Irene, for that. It actually reminded me, that was one of the things from the survey that I was most surprised about, at the fact that less than half of the businesses we connected with were certified as a minority-owned or woman-owned business. And so that certification is a great marketing tool in and of itself. You can more easily be found. I can't pretend to know what the certification requires. So I imagine there's some hurdles there as well, but definitely something that businesses should consider. Did you want to say something, Cheryl?
Absolutely. Just to add to that certification tip, one thing I will share, I'm certified in many different industries, including aviation, but not the fact of just getting seen, but the fact of leading with that, right? Oftentimes you can lead with saying, I am minority owned certified, and that will get you in the door. That will get you a conversation in, because at the end of the day, the top CEO wants to know what's our diversity spend. And so sometimes you may want to lead with that. That's opens up some doors for Canvy and Dee.
Yeah, I think also just even recalling just a lot of the news clippings that I saw, I was just really surprised and I guess like amazed and excited about how many media outlets, particularly for this month of August being Black Business Month, are just highlighting Black businesses or minority-owned businesses or women-owned businesses. Like, media outlets are also seeing this as a trend. And if you lead with that, you can get recognition through the media as well. I mean, how many lists, 56 Black businesses to support over the holidays, 56 women-owned businesses to support for this, for that. If you're traveling, I saw an article, I think one of the clippings was, restaurants to frequent in Charleston for minority-owned businesses. So definitely there's some opportunity there if you can be creative with how you lead with it as well. Another question that came through in our Q&A was, minority and women-owned businesses often compete with large enterprises that have more resources at their disposal for marketing, research, business development. What can and should they do to level the playing field? What have you seen in this regard? Anyone want to start? I'm happy to cold call. What have you seen in this regard?
So I'll share. I mean, the big companies are here, so I was hoping they would answer first. But
the question was interesting in itself because I'm like, can you truly ever level the playing field? I think you can compete, in different ways, and I think you already kind of answered it, Sherelle, earlier when you were talking about looking at ways of acquiring the consumer, your audience, that the larger companies can't do, building those communities, building those relationships, making those personal connections. So from Big Visa, this is what I would say is a way that you do really well. I think that's a myth on large corporations and how we are, like, I feel smaller have easier and quicker access to their community, and that is totally different and that's sometimes why we may miss like really developing products that meet the needs. And I think that's how I'm thinking about it, Sherelle. So yeah, that's why I was quiet for me.
Oh, no, you're definitely spot on. And so just a little bit about us. We provide premium health and wellness products, particularly focused on scalp care. So while we are in over 2,000 retail doors, including CVS, Sally Beauty, et cetera, we also have official partnerships with healthcare institutions, including Moffitt Cancer Center, which ranks in the 1 percentile of cancer hospitals, also Harvard Cancer Center, and City of Hope in Los Angeles. And so one of the things about why they are partnering with Canby, right? We're not a P&G and we're not a Estee Lauder or a L'Oreal. It's the fact that we're truly bringing innovation to the marketplace, right? And so that's one of the ways I lead with in terms of all of our formulations are proprietary. These are unique. These aren't something we're just grabbing off the shelf. So you're getting that innovation piece. Secondly is in terms of true partnership, right? If there is a special, unique type of initiative that they have going on, they can call me up and we can see if we can serve those patients or those clients or their stakeholders quickly and in a great way. And then thirdly, I think what you would bring when you're coming into a large institution that's different is the fact that you're breaking the old norm, right? You're breaking that status quo. So for example, particularly in oncology hospitals, what they've used for decades and forever is steroid creams, right, on patients that are going through treatment and going through chemotherapy. And so the question is that I've always posed to them is, have you stopped and actually thought about that process for patients, right, as they're putting that cream into their scalps? It's gooey and it's gicky and it's yucky, right? And also, what are the side effects for those, right? So why not switch to something that's healthier, something that is very long lasting, it has clean, effective ingredients, and something that really mimics the modern lifestyle of consumers in terms of using healthier solutions. And so if you could communicate your value proposition, why you're better than the other things that they've currently used for decades and decades, and why they should switch, and actually position it to where it's important for them, you can win, but you have to know what that value proposition is for your product and your brand.
Yeah, I agree with Sherelle on the innovation. there too. I think that when we think about ways that big businesses can help small businesses, big businesses do recognize that they want to help small businesses. Small businesses are the thread that really keeps our economy going here in the U.S. And so with Facebook, you can also create your own communities. And I think that's important, that what Sherelle said too, is how do you create that community? How do you continue to garner and find other people who are within, who like your value proposition, who want to stick with you? But then that way you can also see where there are big businesses that you can stay connected with to understand what they're doing. As Dee mentioned, there's a small business hub. Target has accelerators. Google has Google coaches across the country. So big businesses want to help small businesses, and while it is hard, it's about staying connected and to have that community to be building with. When we look at Reddit, Alexis Ohanian is as well. Communities are the next big thing of how people stay connected to each other to find out what's going on, and it's important to be connected, that you can't stay separate from it any longer.
Yeah, I just want to add something that I recently read. It was an article that I just stumbled upon as I was looking for articles and news clippings, but it was from the McBride sisters, and they have a wine brand. And they were saying that, they realized that they couldn't compete with larger brands in the same way. And so they started looking at engagement more strategically. And they literally created wine classes for their community. And it was a really great way to interact with their consumers, understand what they like, what they don't like, what they want to learn, and how they could better craft their offer. And I thought that was such an ingenious way to not only, have relevant content, but use their community to their advantage and really use it for market research as well. So really interesting example. I know we're at, did you want to say something, Kendra?
I was just going to say 2 cents is, I think it's all of that and operating with discipline, because being focused, having a plan, and sticking to that is going to be it, because it's going to be too much data that you need to focus in on what you're trying to do and work that plan.
Love it. I know we are about at time, and so I would just ask one thing from each of you. If you could list a do or a don't for a minority-owned or women-owned business as they think about market research or anything else, what do or don't would you say? What piece of advice would you give them? Already, Kendra, you could start us off with operate with discipline.
Okay, so I will, operate with discipline. I think it's important to be focused. There will be many things that come to distract you. It's about focusing in, being aware of everything else, but sticking to that plan, because I think, steady wins the race.
Yeah. To add to that, one thing I noticed with a lot of the companies or firms that participate in our research, a lot of them have multiple businesses. So owners of more than one business, or have another job, like a full-time job somewhere else. And so when you talk about discipline and being focused, I can imagine how easy it is for someone's attention to be drawn elsewhere if they're running multiple businesses or have lots of responsibilities, or if they're even a parent or something else, or a caregiver in some way. So really good one. Sherelle, did you want to go next with a piece of advice,
Sure.
a do or a don't?
Yes, I'm going to even piggyback off one of the trends that you mentioned earlier, which was find an expert and speak to them. So initially, when I was looking at the business, I actually reached out to Vogue International, who sold their business to J&J for $800 million. I spoke to the CEO and wanted to learn the tricks of the trade of how do you build a business and maintain your equity. So I definitely do that, because if someone, most likely they will give you that opportunity. A don't is to don't fall in the trap of wallowing in your failures, because you will fail every day. You will fail just in your decision making. And so at the end of the day, if you know you are chasing your purpose, if this is what you're put on earth to do, continue to fight for it, continue to run hard, and you'll get over those failures quicker than you think.
Yes, make it happen. Elisa, do you want to go next with a tip?
I was just going to say to that, I'm going to add do passion and purpose, because I think, along those lines, but also trying to support your customers, your consumers on their journey to truly understand that this has been said. I'm just repeating really, because I think it's a do for me as a researcher, right? to understand their priorities and offer an experience, right? What is an experience really for them, and just don't assume. Don't assume. There's a lot of data out there, as we mentioned, so many platforms, do it yourself. A lot of the data that big companies such as Ipsos put out there, for the benefit, for the greater good of society and businesses as well. So do explore as well and understand.
Irene, do you have a tip that you want to share?
It's a little bit of regurgitation of what's already been mentioned, but progress, not perfection. I think one of the biggest blockers for ourselves may be doubt. And a lot of times we have to get over ourselves. It's something I say a lot when you're doing marketing. And people sometimes are afraid and timid, but we really want to say no one's looking at it from that perspective. But if you make small steps to investigate and to learn as much as you can, then you'll eventually get there, but it doesn't have to be perfect, that journey.
Love it. Last but not least, Dee.
Yeah, I think one of the things from a research perspective is remove the concept of the average user. As people, as humans, we are always evolving. And so we have to think from that perspective. There's no average user. And so it kind of lines in with what I do as inclusive design, is bringing in those traditionally marginalized, underserved communities to really solve for few, but be able to expand for many, for equity and innovation. And so that's something that I definitely push us to all do from a research perspective.
I love it. Thank you so much to each and every one of the panelists. Sherelle, Elisa, Irene, Kendra, Dee, you were phenomenal. Thank you to the audience for joining us today. This is a really special event and we're glad we're able to connect with you. Again, any questions that weren't answered, we will follow up via email and you'll receive the recording because you registered. So thank you. And that's it. Ellen, back to you.
Well, I just want to echo the sentiment of how wonderful today's presentation was and all our guests' input. The recording should be emailed within the next few days, so please be on a lookout for that. And in the meantime, we always look forward to speaking with you directly, so please contact Janelle at any time. That now concludes today's webinar, folks. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.